Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views in News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about something very important. Again, this was expected by the Indians, as we have always seen that the Indian government, this anti-Pakistan sentiment is something they believe in. They actually depend on it. And this is something which they use in order to malign the overall image of Pakistan. Now, the latest incident was when the Indian agencies picked up two Pakistani officials of the High Commission. They took them for interrogation, and on top of that, they were subjected to torture, abuse, and they were also threatened. But later on, the High Commission intervened, and now we have heard that those two individuals or the officials of the Pakistani High Commission, they have been considered this terminology which they use is persona non grata. They are not favorite, so they'll be sent back and they were ordered to leave India within the next 24 hours. Now, this is something which is not at all acceptable. Pakistani authorities, the Foreign Office today, in fact, summoned the charge d'affaires of the Indian High Commission, and they lodged their complaint also. But this is something primarily now India is just trying to divert its attention towards Pakistan and trying to malign Pakistan and the Pakistani officials present on the duty in India. Now, this is not the first time that has happened. If you remember, similar activity took place a few years ago when certain individuals, including the High Commissioner, was sent back. And Pakistan did the same as a response. Now, what exactly is going on? Why is India doing this? Currently, as we all know, that India is facing a lot of problem on the border side, especially if you talk about the northeast side, you're talking about Sikkim. You talk about the northwest side, you're talking about Kashmir, and you're also talking about Ladakh now. That is the area where the Chinese have in fact been able to take their own land back in certain areas where the Indian forces were initially present, and they were threatening the Chinese forces. According to one of the interview of Hamid, he says that, well, we are ready, we are totally geared up, and we can take on Pakistan and take on China at the same time. Now, this is something, since the military has been politicized as well, this Hindutva concept, this RSS philosophy, that is in their blood now. You can't take that out. And what is happening is, other than the Hindus, India is not for any other religion, whether you talk about the Muslims, you talk about the Dalits, you talk about the Christians, you talk about, for that matter, Jains, or you talk about Sikhs. This is exactly what is happening. People who are Hindu are having a good time. Anybody who's a non-Hindu, this is exactly what is happening. What we have witnessed, like the blacks, the way they are treated in USA, this is exactly what the Indians are doing there in India. Though we do understand that the largest population is of Hindu origin. But having said that, there are millions and millions of people. Almost the same number of Muslims living in Pakistan is the number living in India. You talk about Sikhs, there are around 12 crore Sikhs. So that's a huge number. Now, talking about this, we want some very interesting comments from the guests we have. Let me introduce you to our panelists. We have with us Dr. Asma Shakir Khwaja Sahib. Ma'am is a foreign affairs expert and is with us on the Skype. Thank you very much, Dr. Asma Khwaja, for taking out the time and talking to us. And we'll also be talking to Brigadier Retired Tipu Sultan Sahib, who is a senior analyst. In particular, his comments regarding the military point of view is very important. And we'll be also talking to Ambassador Arslan Rizvi Sahib. He's a former senior diplomat. That what exactly is brewing out there? What's going on? But Asma Khwaja Sahib, let me put this question to you. Now, the charge d'affaires was summoned today. Obviously, the complaint was lodged. It was registered. At the same time now, a day ago, when the Indian authorities picked up these two officials of the High Commission, they were subjected to torture, mental torture, physical torture. They were threatened. And this is what has happened. And this is not the first time. I remember once there was this video made in which a Pakistani family, there was a family of one of the officials of the embassy along with their children, and they were crying and they were being harassed by the intelligence people of India. So, ma'am, how long will this continue? Why doesn't they understand that this is something which should be handled diplomatically? This is not the way. Your take, ma'am.
Actually, when we see the policies of Modi regime and the modus operandi Modi regime follows to address different and various issues, we see that propaganda tactics are at the core of Modi's regime and Modi's policies. So now we can see, as you know, that the way Modi corona response is a failure in India, and people are dying, and or migrant workers are dying because of the poverty and hunger and all those things. And then there is an immense internal pressure on Modi regime for the blunder they have committed when it comes to fighting corona. And then on borders, what they are engaged in humiliation by China, and it is really a humiliating point of view, because when you see Twitter, all mostly Indians and Indian expatriates and international observers or analysts, they are mocking India for this response to China and their inability to stand on their grounds. So this is how, so I think Modi advisors have found it an easy way to divert the public's attention from the failures of Modi regime on external and internal fronts, and this is the easiest and most saleable thing to generate an issue on which Indian people can, or Hindu radicals, they can focus on hating or maligning Pakistan rather than focusing or addressing the actual issues of concerns for Indian people. So this is, I would say, a lame diplomatic failure on Indian part, another lame diplomatic failure on Indian part, and the way they have treated the Pakistani diplomatic officials and the way they have called them persona non grata. Definitely Modi doesn't need another front to fight when already China is Indian armed military and Chinese military is in a difficult situation on border, on LSE, on line of actual control. And
Yeah.
then what is happening on internal front with the poorest and the most lame corona response policy in the region by India. So Modi doesn't need a third front, but in order to avoid the criticism or being answerable for these two fronts, Modi has opened this third front with Pakistan, or reopened. But I am sure that Pakistan would deal it with vision and maturity, so that Modi would not find another reason to divert public's attention from the real issues and the humiliation India is facing on when it comes to China.
Now, Dr. Asma Khwaja, one more quick comment before I go and have a word with Ambassador Aslam Rizvi. Ma'am, there were reports about a week ago, maybe 6 days ago, that the Indian Army Chief, General Manoj, he had visited Ladakh area primarily, and he was also accompanied by the general who heads the Northern Command of Indian Army. So what sort of a message was that, ma'am? Because the visit of the chief, looking into the area, then beefing up the security, increasing the number of troops, and actually the same was done by the Chinese side also. Do you think, ma'am, it could lead at some stage, I'm not saying a full-fledged war or something, but what we had read about the Indian and the Chinese War of 1962. Do you think something of that sort can happen?
Yeah, for me as a student of security studies, this latest border clashes between Indian and Chinese forces have actually highlighted the Kashmir issue as a disputed territory, Ladakh as a disputed territory, India as a problem or instability trigger in the region, because the way the Indian Army Chief and the Northern Chief of Northern Command have visited Ladakh, it shows the intensity of the
And the
situation
seriousness of the issue, yeah?
yeah, and fatality of line of actual control with China.
All
And
right.
then I'm
Ma'am,
sure
I'll
you
get
know
back to you.
that
Aslam Rizvi
India,
Saab, Assalamu alaikum ji.
जी वाला
Sir, thank you very much for taking out your time and talking to PTV World. Now, as a diplomat, sir, let me put this question to you. that when the intelligence agencies harass the diplomats or pick them, subject them to torture, violence, threat them, don't you think, sir, this is the absolute violation of the diplomatic immunity?
Yes, indeed. You see, the point is that it is a normal international practice that you have spies into each other's countries. And usually we are there to get military intelligence or to get other on the establishment or commercial or economic information. Now, as far as our two countries are concerned, we have a history of spies on both sides. They have been making allegations against Pakistan, and we have also not only just the most recent one, and Abid, who was the visa officer, and the Tahir, who was a clerk. Because as you yourself mentioned, that we had a tit for tat some years ago.
Yep.
They expelled some of ours, and we expelled theirs on the same charges that they are spies. But there is a fundamental difference between what India is doing and what Pakistan has been accused of. As we've seen that in the past, there has been a spy called the Sarabjit Singh in 1990, who had been in Pakistan and responsible for bombing 3 or 4 countries. And the famous case of Kashmir Singh, you remember, who came into 1993 and was released by General Musharraf in down the line. Now, when he crossed the border, he proudly said that I am a spy, I did my duty. You see? And the most famous, of course, is Jadhav. So we have here these people not just coming to for spying, but being responsible for sabotage, for training people within Pakistan to carry out, bombings and killing of innocent people and so on. So there's a fundamental difference between this fire. Now, the other thing is that, as pointed out by the other speaker, that this is done primarily to divert the intention of the world, of what is going on internally and as well as externally. And to the extent, just imagine that not only that they have these drones coming across Pakistan that you shoot down, and also claiming that we have sent spy pigeons. I mean, the world, you saw some TV programs, they're all laughing about it.
That has actually made the whole world laugh, and that was a very interesting joke, actually, the pigeon, the spy pigeon. But one more important point. Now, that is also about when a government or when the intelligence agencies, they try to create a scenario, sir, in which the tension is not diffused, it's rather multiplied, and the magnitude of the issue is also, it has, crossed a certain line. Now, what I'm asking, sir, is that do you believe that the Indians, maybe on their own or maybe on the behest of some other, are trying to gauge China and Pakistan at the same time during this time of Corona? You talk about the South China Sea. You can well imagine what exactly the Americans are doing there. The Japanese, they have a certain plan. The Philippines, South Korea for that matter, their statements regarding Taiwan or Hong Kong is something which is very latest. I mean, I'm sure you must be following that. And at the same time, when you talk about that particular area, whether you talk about Sikkim or you talk about Ladakh on that side, uh, the Western world is primarily supporting the agenda of USA, and USA is primarily at the same time supporting what the Indians are doing. Do you see a clear-cut division on these lines, sir?
Yes, the problem is you know, it is most unfortunate, and when the whole world is in the grip of
Aslam Rizvi Saab, I can't hear you clearly. Our team is going to call you again, and we'll just join you in a couple of seconds. There's a little problem in the reception, I guess. I'll just get back to you in 30, 40 seconds. But let me put the same question to Asma Shakir Khwaja Saiba.
Yeah,
Ji, ma'am.
can you please repeat the question?
Well, what I had asked the ambassador was that, do you believe that whatever is being done, the way they are trying to encircle China, and along with that, they are also gauging Pakistan. I'm talking about the Indian perspective. At the same time, we see exercises being done between the Americans, the Indians, and the Japanese, naval exercises, so on and so forth. On the extreme eastern front, the Chinese are being pressurized, and now this thing is also happening on the western and the southwestern part of China as well.
Yeah, apparently it looks like Modi needs to be bailed out, and Modi needs to wants USA to consider India as the most reliable partner, and especially in there are various researches going on in the world that how COVID-19 has affected the international security paradigm and the system, and where India or China and the USA we would stand in that paradigm. So I think by engaging in those unwanted, unnecessary engagements in the region, and especially with China, but if we see that India has done the similar things with Pakistan and Nepal and all other countries, the problem is that India considered China as Nepal maybe, and that is why they engaged in it. But all these things actually are strategically would be beneficial for India, because Indian regional security policies is being driven by the objective to trigger and instigate USA's security anxieties, and that is where India find its strategic depth in the strategic anxieties of USA. So this border clash with China would serve this purpose of India to present or portray itself as the best available partner in South Asia to challenge the Chinese power. And as far as we know how China moves, China's policy is always been to remain focused on economy and trade benefits and trade and these security, those things, they don't let it hijack the Chinese economic or security or in trade interest. And when we see that how these things are, if we see the larger picture, recently in Modi President wrote a letter to the people, in the Indian people or people about this letter is like a report card of Modi regime for the first 1 year, that how they performed and what they have done for India. So in that letter, Modi regime's report card was consisted of number one, all I would say anti-Muslim acts. For example, abrogation of the Article 370, the CAA bill, Citizen Amendment Bill, and then the way they have dealt with minorities and all those things, and the issue of triple divorce for Muslim women. So all those achievement things which Modi presented as his achievements during first year, they all are anti-Muslim acts in which Modi regime, BJP, legitimized the discriminatory policies vis-a-vis Muslims and other minorities within the Indian constitution. So if this derogatory behavior towards minorities and Muslims is a feather in Modi's cap to be presented with pride in front of Indian people in that so-called letter. So we can see that where and what Modi intends to do at external front, intends to achieve on external borders, and that is again bullying neighbors, gaining strength from the insecurities of the USA and or strategic anxieties of the USA and presenting itself or somehow
All
India.
right.
See, if
Dr.
India is
Saiba,
able,
yeah.
yeah.
Dr. Saiba, now there are a couple of points. I mean, I'm sure you must have been following for the last 6 days what's happening in United States of America. You talk about LA, you talk about New York, you talk about Chicago, you talk about Pennsylvania, you talk about any other major state or city. We all know what's going on out there. This issue regarding the blacks, I mean, you start off from Rodney King, if you remember, that truck driver, and half of America was practically burning. Now, this has happened too. What I'm saying is, ma'am, now when you talk about something which is very, very different, you're trying to change the social fabric of society. This is something, India used to be a very secular state, that's what we have heard. But now, for the last almost 7-8 years, what we have witnessed is that anti-Muslim, anti-Sikh, pro-Hindu, you know, these kind of policies are being introduced, which is a big threat. And especially when you look at the map of India, it's so vulnerable. I was in fact reading about the chicken neck right below the Chinese border, which touches the Sikkim area. So many, 5-6 states are on the literally around Bangladesh. There are so many weaknesses Indians have, especially when there are movements going on for independence. Top north Kashmir, come down Tamil side, Khalistan, on that side Nagaland, you name it. Aren't they actually trying to, in fact, if they are trying to make Modi or the RSS philosophy, really progress in the area at the cost of such a huge, I would say, weakness, ma'am?
If you see, if we see Modi, Modi's vision is very short term. Modi thinks, if we see the characteristics of his regime, Modi sees only for or works for immediate benefits. Whether it was the Muslim massacre of Gujarat of 2002 or its anti-Muslims agenda in the recent years. But I would like to add that I don't think, as a student of South Asian studies, that India was ever secular, because if India would have been secular, two nation theory would never emerge, or a Muslim League was never founded, or Muslims in subcontinent would never think of a separate country. So this religious nationalism was always there, and that is what pushed Muslims from Hindustan Hamara to a separate Muslim, the journey to have a separate Muslim state. And if we see Modi only unleashed or revealed that side because of its short-sightedness. Previously, leaders were more diplomatic or maybe more educated, and they were successfully keeping that secular face of India at the forefront while dealing with the outer world. We should not forget that during those so-called secular regimes, India faced the most fatal anti-minority massacres, like of Khalistan, the Sikhs and Muslims, and at different conjunctures of history. So what Modi has done, that is definitely is further polarizing Indian minorities. It is decreasing the stakes of Indian minorities in the larger state system of India, and there is what is fertile, and this provides a fertile ground for a sense of least privileged or underprivileged in a larger Indian setup. And this is what
Brigadier Tibu Saab, Assalamu alaikum, sir, and thank you for taking out the time and talking to us. Now, I'm sure you must be following this story regarding the torture and the abuse and the threats which were given to two Pakistani diplomats, I would say. They were the officials of the Pakistani High Commission in India. They were picked up and all this happened, and now they have been declared this persona non grata, and they have been told to leave India in 24 hours. First of all, sir, your take on this particular news.
Faisal, I lost you. I can't hear you.
Yeah, Brigadier Saab, can you hear me, sir?
No.
Okay. I'll repeat the question. Brigadier Saab, I'll repeat the question. I had asked that your take on this expulsion of the two Pakistani diplomats, the high commissioners, who were earlier picked up by the Indian intelligence agencies. They were tortured, they were abused, they were threatened. When you talk about this diplomatic immunity, there is no concept in India, by the way. And now, sir, they've been told to leave within the next 24 hours. Your take on this particular news story?
The Indians have broken all international laws and norms. Society. The Indian policy in some kind of self-deception and deceiving the world, it is unacceptable. Area what the Indians are doing to their own.
Brigadier Saab, I can't hear you properly. Yeah, I think we'll just get connected once again. There was some reception problem most likely. But let me go back to Asma Khwaja Saiba. Asma Khwaja Saiba, another point here. When you see this particular region in Asia, two mega giants primarily, one is India, one is China. When you look at the allies of the American, you'll see Japan, you'll see South Korea, you'll see Australia, you'll see Philippines, so many other countries. The trade is done there. And then China obviously is countered on this particular side, as I said earlier as well. Do you think, ma'am, India is practically being prepared to counter China with all sorts of, whether you talk about the military support, financial support, since the transfer of technology is already there, Americans are looking at selling a lot of weapons to the Indians as well. It seems that the alignments have changed because the interests have changed, because the goals and the objectives, they have also changed in the region.
See that how Indian forces or Indian government responded to this recent issue in Ladakh. It is a clear manifestation of India's capability to counter China. India, I don't think so, have the capability, potential, or even courage to counter
Despite
China.
the full support of the Americans, whether you talk about money, weapon, technology, anything.
Yes, exactly. But you see, this reminds me what the famous South Asian philosopher Chankya Kotelia said, that if your enemy is stronger than you, make peace with him until or unless you are able to equalize his power. So as far as we know, the accumulative power of China, India is not even closer to that. So this is a false image, again, like the secular image. This is a false image, again, India is trying to portray to the outer world, especially to the USA, for financial and definitely security or strategic benefits. So this is again a false notion. I don't think that in terms of economic capacity, because you see, this security or strategic ambitions, they need to be substantiated, or they need to be compatible with the economic power and economic potential of a state. And if what is happening in India, people are dying during this lockdown. Migrant workers are dying like, sorry to say, stray animals on the streets, and no one takes the responsibility for that misery what Modi has caused for his own people. So this is what, and where and before COVID-19, Indian economy was on tailspin. So when it comes to economy, the military potential, and overall the accumulative power, India has no match with China. So India can give this false perception to be a counter force against China, but definitely we see that Indian government released a video of hitting or beating a Chinese soldier, and in return, the Chinese government or Chinese people, they released a video of hitting or beating like dozens of Indian soldiers, and people were asking that where is this surgical strikes are now when it comes to China. China is within the as per Indian version. We don't believe, and I personally don't agree with the Indian version. But as per Indian version, the Chinese military was in their territory, and what they have done, where is the surgical strikes, where is the the where are the airstrikes and all this, that so-called furious response which India takes against Pakistan. So this shows that that Indian government, Indian policymaker, and Indian military, they exactly know where they stand when it comes to power balancing vis-a-vis China, and that
All
is
right.
why they are like chicken hearts in front of China.
All right. Now, Aslam Rizvi Saab, again, let me put this question to you, that when you look at the statement issued by our own Prime Minister Imran Khan Saab, he says that India is totally geared up for a false flag operation. And now this particular move by the Indians to declare two officials persona non grata, and they've asked them to leave India within the next 24 hours. Do you believe, are these two linked in one way or the other, sir?
Well, you have to see the overall picture because you see, as pointed out by Dr. Asma, the relationship between United States and China being as it is, and the election year coming in November, the Indians feel that they are able to get away with doing anything without the world condemning it or taking any action. So you saw that when what the action they took in August last year with regards to Kashmir, and now more recently we saw also with respect to Ladakh. Nobody, I beg your pardon, with respect to the border dispute with Nepal. You see, so they thought they should be able to also do things in Ladakh. And once they started going with the line of actual control with China, they thought they will, China will not react, but China did take a stand. So now they are using this as a basis for being shown as a victim, bringing back to the West the 1962 the India-China border thing, and after which India received a lot of assistance from the West as a whole in America. But the whole point I want to say here is this is a very dangerous game that India is playing right now. The whole world at the moment is in the grip of the coronavirus epidemic. What is, required is that both for, countries, that we should look at the common enemy, that is the coronavirus. And if we are going to be, focusing on exaggerating, threatening the area, creating tensions in the region, this will take away the focus on fighting the coronavirus from there, and which could mean that the government's ability to cope with it could affect the whole of South Asia. So what is needed is badly for India that it must, assume a less threatening posture and be more cooperative, and the West should put pressure on India to focus on better relations from here, and especially with regards to Kashmir, because already the action in August with the lockdown there and the blockade of communication, etc., has the violations of human rights have gone manifold, and criticism also coming within the country and outside also about the Indian action from there. So pressure should be put on the Indians on this issue, and not let the attempts by India to divert attention with the likes of the border clashes and pigeons flying across and things of that nature.
But Aslam Rizvi Saab, there is another question. Do you think this particular Indian action taken by the authorities or whatever group or the particular agency which was involved, since a lot of people also believe that this could be a move in order to shrink the diplomatic space between the two countries, because so that no talks could ever take place. At least, instead of being at a certain level, you stoop down further, and then, I mean, it takes a lot of time and effort to bring the situation back to normalcy, and then you can engage in a conversation. Over here, they have totally reduced the diplomatic space, isn't it?
You're exactly right. You see, what they have done really is a violation of the Vienna Convention of the diplomatic relations and diplomatic norms. Now, what, if you recall, by the action again in August of last year, we downgraded our relationship to the level of the charge d'affaires. Our heads of mission, the ambassadors, was sent packing. So that cut down the, communication, the diplomacy between the two countries. When they, whenever there is trouble, we resolve things through dialogue, and usually, and the best, of course, are the level of the ambassadors to reduce tension. Now, here, by creating further tension, making more reduction in the, staff of the two people, like I said, one was dealing with visas. And the reason that I mentioned the fact that, that earlier in the beginning, that this is a normal kind of a thing about the spying and so on, and from there. And usually, you find that it is the visa section where the security agencies send their trained people. And the reason they have done this with the officials here is to try and befool the rest of the world that this is what the Pakistanis are doing, and hoping that they'll accept the fact that Pakistan was actually involved in such an action, when it is totally unsubstantiated and it is baseless allegation.
All right. Thank you very much, Aslam Rizvi Saab, for your comments. We'll also have a word with Brigadier Tipu. Now he's online with us. Brigadier Saab, first of all, now that was the perspective from the diplomatic side, that how do we engage and how do we think. We were talking about the shrinking of the diplomatic space between the two countries. Now let's talk about the military perspective. Reading the statements from their head of defense or their chief of army staff that we can engage Pakistan and China at the same time, and something which is not practically possible, but at least just to make sure that their public should be happy after listening to this statement. What exactly is India up to, sir?
Well, Faisal, let me tell you that in the region of Siachen and Niobrara and Shayok valleys and south of Karakoram Pass, the Indians have been far ahead of Pakistan. They got the town of Kargil in the early 1970s, and then they occupied the entire Siachen Glacier in 1984, which is 76 kilometers, and it is the second largest glacier outside the polar region, and sometimes it is called the third pole also. The average height of the area over there is 18,500 feet. You must understand that any military which wants to develop operations in that area, it has to be in the valley. And with reference to the place where the Indians are ahead of Ladakh, which is in the Shayok Valley or Niobrara Valley or south of Xinjiang province, China, and across the Karakoram Pass. I think if they want to get onto the glaciers, they can seriously threaten us from that angle, and they can outskirt us. However, if any force movement had to take place in the Shayok Valley, the Indians pocketed in that corridor just north of Siachen Glacier, and they get onto the Siachen Glacier from a village called Zegrulma, And then they control all the passes coming down from the Asian glacier, whether it is Belafont Law or Gyeong Law or Cholong Law or whatever. All the law is a pass. It is like Karakoram Pass, it is a Belafont Pass, it is a Gyeong Law, and all these passes come down into the Skardu Valley through Khaplu. And you know, the Chinese presence over there threatens the Indians to be outmaneuvered and outskirt, and their forces will be tied. They cannot move on the ground in the valley. The only supplies they would have is through the air strip that they have made, that big holding, a place called over there Daulat Beg. The Daulat Beg holding place
Sir,
which they have.
but now that sounds interesting, because you have very categorically mentioned about the geography of the area, where the pass is. You have defined the border area as well. So at some stage, because this is how things trigger. No bullets have been fired so far. It's been fist fighting, or they've been throwing stones on each other on that particular part. But sir, all it takes is a one single round fired, and then everything is out of control. That's how wars start. But currently, sir, looking at the situation now, this is Corona time. The whole world is thinking on different lines, whereas Americans have something else brewing in their mind. When you listen to Donald Trump, though he has said that he can mediate between the two, but the Chinese, they have refused, so the cases with the Indians. These are two huge countries, sir. The two top populated countries in the world. Number one is China, number two is India. Both are nuclear states. And other nuclear state right next to them is Pakistan. Then lots of presence of the Americans in the South China Sea. The Japanese, again, the allies in the region. Do you think the Americans are actually thinking, because the Cold War is on, the trade war is on as well, that the Americans are trying to sort of squeeze China through India? Brigadier Saab.
The Indians have not had the courage of firing a single rifle round in the last 40 years on the Chinese on the line of actual control. And they come and they sat there and they don't know what to do. The entire Indian media is yelling at the Indian army and the Indian government, and they've not been able to do anything, and they have been deceiving their people. They said, no, it's all right, we will talk to them. And the Chinese are not even having flag meetings over there with them. I think the Chinese will never ever allow the Indians to approach their Belt and Road Initiative and CPAC initiative that they're taking with Pakistan. The Indians can be rest assured that they will be sorted out by the Chinese should they dare to do that. That is one thing absolutely clear. The other thing is that the Chinese are never going to agree to America or what they want to dictate the Chinese through the Indians. The Indians are not in a position to perform. They have not been able to perform in the Asia Pacific region, and with the Chinese, of course, they will never ever dare to fire a single rifle round. What to talk of an artillery, etc. If it is to be started, it has to be started by the Chinese. And the Indians just do not have any chance to fight the Chinese. And let me tell you that
Home Minister,
the Indian policy...
their defense minister rather, he says that India is properly geared up to fight on two fronts. India is ready to fight with China and at the same time with Pakistan. This is their statement, and he seemed pretty confident.
I think on the Western front, forget about East Pakistan. On the West Pakistan side, the olden West Pakistan side, or now the border which exists between India and Pakistan, Indians have never had their strategic goals and they have never had any success anywhere except in the region north of a point what is called NJ 9842. It's a geographical location where the border was directed towards the Karakoram Pass, and the Indians occupied a vacant Sechan glacier, which is about 18,500 feet. The Pakistanis wanted to regain that, but they could not do that because the Santoro range through which all the laws comes down. All the Pakistani positions are at least 2,500 and 3,000 feet below the Indian positions. The only way to pocket the Indians is across. If we skirt around Kargil town to a village Regrulma and occupy Shayok Valley. And if we occupy Shayok Valley, any force which occupies Indus River will have the success. The Indians are in a great trouble there, and you will see that they will be coming down on their knees and requesting the Chinese.
I totally agree with you on this front. And interestingly, the most important factor is that India should realize that they are so vulnerable. Earlier, we were having a word about this chicken neck. Please Google that. You will see that if that particular area, north of Sikkim, that particular area, south of the Chinese border, that's just like a tail. If that is blocked, the entire 5-6 major divisions of India, which are surrounding Bangladesh, can be cut off. So the case is what Brigadier Saab was just mentioning. But anyway, I think sanity will prevail. Brigadier Saab, we'll definitely do another show on this, where we would exploit the weaknesses of India and what's exactly going on out there. But once again, thank you very much for your contribution. And thank you very much, Dr. Saiba, and Aslam Rizvi Saab as well. Thank you very much, sir. And that's all we have for this, sir. I'll see you again tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.